For a long time, the Green Lantern reboot felt like one of those projects everyone quietly assumed would play it safe. Darker than the old DC stuff, sure, but still controlled, still familiar, still very much a superhero series at its core. And then, little by little, it became obvious that Lanterns is not playing that game at all. This isn't a slightly edgy comic book adaptation. This feels like DC handing the keys to HBO and saying, do whatever you want, just make it honest. And if you know HBO, you know what that means. This isn't about spectacle first, it's about tension, discomfort, and letting a story crawl instead of sprint. What really stands out is how intentionally Lanterns avoids feeling like a traditional comic book show. There's no sense that this is building toward constant flashy set pieces or colorful cosmic chaos every episode. The tone they're going for is restrained, almost cold, and very grounded in human behavior. It feels closer to a crime drama than a superhero series, which is why the True Detective comparison actually lands. Not because it's copying that show, but because it's chasing the same energy. Two men, two very different worldviews, trapped in a mystery that slowly reveals something deeply wrong beneath the surface. At the center of all of this are Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, played by Kyle Chandler and Aaron Pierre. On paper, that already tells you a lot. Chandler brings this worn-in authority to Hal, like someone who's seen too much and carries it quietly. Aaron Pierre, especially after Rebel Ridge, feels like a perfect Jon Stewart. Disciplined, observant, emotionally controlled, and not interested in posturing. These aren't two heroes teaming up for fun. These are two lawmen forced into the same investigation. And according to James Gunn himself, what they uncover is described as an ancient horror on Earth. That phrase matters. Ancient horror doesn't suggest a villain you punch and forget. It suggests something old, buried, and fundamentally unsettling. Before even getting lost in theories, it's important to understand what Lanterns actually is from a production standpoint. This is not just another streaming show that happens to be on Max. This is a full HBO production, and that distinction changes everything. HBO doesn't worry about toys or four-quadrant appeal. They care about tone, dialogue, and atmosphere, even if it makes viewers uncomfortable. While there's no official rating yet, all signs point toward TVMA. Nathan Fillion casually mentioned that he dropped more F-bombs on his first day shooting Lanterns than in his entire career combined, and that wasn't improvisation. That was the script. That alone tells you the boundaries this show is willing to push. If you watch Creature Commandos, you already know DC Studios isn't afraid to go hard with mature content on the TV side. Lanterns feels like that philosophy taken seriously in live action. What makes this even more interesting is how it fits into the wider DCU without matching its tone. We already saw Fillion's Guy Gardner pop up in Superman, loud, abrasive, full of ego, and somehow still weirdly likable. That movie was colorful and optimistic by design. Lanterns is the opposite. It's dirtier, colder, and far more paranoid. Guy is confirmed to appear here too, but don't expect the same energy. This contrast feels deliberate. It's DC finally committing to genre diversity inside one shared universe, instead of forcing everything into the same tonal box. Superman represents hope, Lanterns represents fear, and what happens when authority starts cracking. The release schedule has been messy, but the current picture is clearer. Lanterns was originally expected to arrive in early 2026, but Peter Safran has now confirmed a late summer release. The entire first season finished shooting back in October, so the delay isn't about production trouble. This feels like HBO and DC taking their time with post-production and choosing the right release window. There was already a trailer shown privately at an HBO upfront event, and while it hasn't been released publicly, the details that leaked are extremely revealing. One of the biggest takeaways from that trailer is that Hal is not the Lantern originally meant to train Jon. He's filling in. Someone else was supposed to mentor Jon, and that absence is clearly intentional. If you know Green Lantern history, one name immediately jumps out: Katma Tui. In the comics, and especially in the Justice League animated series, Katma Tui is a defining figure in Jon Stewart's life. She trained him, challenged him, and eventually became his wife. If she exists in this universe and is missing, that's not a throwaway detail. That's a wound in the story. Something happened to her, and whatever that something is, it likely ties directly into the mystery Hal and Jon are investigating. The leaked footage also reportedly shows Hal and Jon clashing constantly, which feels right. Hal is the old guard, a legend who's been doing this forever. Jon is methodical, serious, and uninterested in ego or shortcuts. That friction fits perfectly with a grounded, investigative narrative. They're operating in a small Nebraska town called Rushville, looking into a murder that feels out of place and deeply wrong. There is action, including a glimpse of Hal mid-fight, but it's clearly being used sparingly. This show isn't allergic to spectacle, it's just disciplined about it. There's even a reported reference to Chip, the squirrel-like alien lantern from the comics. On paper that sounds ridiculous, but including something like that actually shows confidence. It means the show isn't embarrassed by its roots. It's just choosing when to lean into them. The casting across the board feels very intentionally HBO coded. Kyle Chandler brings weight to Hal Jordan in a way that feels earned. Aaron Pierre feels like a breakout waiting to happen. Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner is pure fan service done right. Kelly MacDonald plays Sheriff Kerry, a grounded presence in Rushville who also serves as a romantic interest for Hal, anchoring him to the human side of the story. Poorna Jagannathan plays Zoe, described as confident, composed, and able to stand toe-to-toe with powerful men, with strong hints that she may form a connection with John. And then there's Ulrich Thompson as Sinestro, which is inspired casting. This version of Sinestro isn't about grand speeches and cartoon villainy. He's ideological, manipulative, charming, and obsessed with his former mentee. In a story about fear and control, he fits perfectly. But the real wildcard here is Garrett Dillahunt. Officially, he's playing a character named William Macon, described as a modern cowboy with ruthless ambition and charm. If that description doesn't immediately set off alarm bells for anyone familiar with DC lore, it should. In the comics, Black Hand's real name is William Hand. Combine that with James Gunn's comment about an ancient horror on Earth, and the picture starts to come together. This doesn't sound like Sinestro's doing, this sounds like death. This sounds like the Black Lantern mythology quietly being seeded into the DCU. The Black Lantern Corps is one of the darkest concepts DC has ever introduced. It deals with death, resurrection, grief, and the manipulation of loss. Jeff Johns didn't introduce it casually back in 2009, and it's not something you bring into live action without intention. HBO, of all places, is where that story could actually work. And then there's Atrocitus. In the comics, he's a survivor of a massacre carried out by the Manhunters, one of only 5 beings left alive. Together, they formed the 5 Inversions and performed a ritual that allowed them to glimpse the future. What they saw was the blackest night, the end of all life. Atrocitus learned that William Hand was destined to become the Black Hand, the herald of that apocalypse. He tried to kill him to prevent it, leading to a chain of events involving Sinestro and Hal Jordan. Now imagine that mythology being adapted slowly, through a murder investigation in a quiet American town. What if the crime that brings Hal and John to Rushville isn't random at all? What if it's ritualistic? What if it's connected to either Atrocitus hunting William, or William beginning his transformation? That would absolutely qualify as an ancient horror. It would also position Lanterns as the foundation for a much larger DCU storyline, which is exactly what James Gunn and Peter Safran have hinted at. Safran has openly said that the mystery in Lanterns feeds directly into the larger narrative they're building across the universe. The creative team behind the show only reinforces that idea. Chris Mundy, coming from Ozark, knows how to stretch tension and make small decisions feel catastrophic. Damon Lindelof understands mystery better than almost anyone, especially when it comes to planting clues that pay off years later. His Watchmen series proved he can handle comic book material with maturity and restraint. Tom King brings emotional weight and psychological depth that superhero stories desperately need. And James Hawes, directing the first episodes with his work on Slow Horses and Black Mirror, tells you exactly what kind of atmosphere they're chasing. Shooting in LA while portraying rural Nebraska gives them full control over building a small town world that feels authentic and unsettling, a place where something cosmic doesn't belong but has arrived anyway. This is why Lanterns feels so important. It's not just another DC show, it's a statement. It tells the audience that this universe can handle darkness without becoming edgy for the sake of it. It can be grounded and cosmic at the same time. It can respect decades of lore while reshaping it for modern television. And honestly, after seeing how James Gunn handled Guy Gardner in Superman, my confidence in this project shot way up. If Lantern sticks the landing, it could easily end up being one of the smartest and boldest things DC has ever put on screen. Late summer 2026 suddenly feels very far away.